Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3607. Today's date is September 23, 2025. It's been almost like morning at almost 8 a.m. Okay, yeah, it's a very beautiful morning over here. Okay, yeah, let's just jump into the question. All right, let's go. Here it is. Okay. Okay, question is what if viruses evolved to help rather than harm? Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question? Okay, yeah. It's a what if question. Okay, yeah. And why am I asking this? Is because of that, ki, I don't know. Like every time I record artifact and kind of like somebody say this thing, why am I asking this question to myself? It's just like I need to ask something question to myself. Okay, yeah. What if question is it's really good. It's something that night it kind of like a something that came try to think from different point of perspective. Okay, and and while giving the answer, it is something that feels good. By the way, am I asking this question in Artifact episode is not meant to be the information that I'm trying to tell you is right or correct? Definitely not. Or it's just thought process. It's just my thought process, and probably this is not right and not wrong. It's kind of like a somebody. It's just kind of like a somebody. I revise the information that I have in myself. That's it. Okay, yeah. So kind of like a simply disclaimer. Okay, first is kind of like a disclaimer that the information that I'm providing in here is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either too. It's a kind of like a simply thought process which is not filtered yet. All right. So let's jump to the question. Okay, the question is what if virus evolved to help rather than harm? Okay, so let me clarify this question as simple as possible as you can. Okay, so that everyone would understand. Okay, yeah. Now let's talk about viruses. Okay, yeah. What do you know about viruses? Computer virus? Okay. No, I'm not talking about the computer virus. I'm talking about kind of like a virus. It's actually a virus. Okay, yeah. A genetic virus or any kind of like a virus, like a COVID virus. Okay, yeah. A couple of year ago, COVID is actually happened. There is a COVID virus. Okay, yeah. COVID-19 virus. Then AIDS. There is a lot of viruses, by the way. Okay, yeah. And we actually think that ki virus is really dangerous. First of all, okay, yeah. Let's just understand this microorganism first. Okay, yeah, because this kind of like a only concept that we early knows in our human life. Early knows means like that, like probably just 50 year ago, 50 or maybe 50 or 60 year ago. That's it. We just know about that stuff. Before that, we like not like basically this thing the okay. Let me clarify. Okay, what is earlier? So since the kind of like a somebody human is actually evolved on this planet, humans actually die because of some certain thing. Okay, yeah. And early humans don't know why people are dying. Okay, they thought that people are die is because of kind of like some external threats like killing somebody or kind of like some sort of pain or some sort of kind of like something the injured, and because of this thing people usually die. Okay, yeah. So this is what kind of like a concept that we have, that why does people die is because of kind of like a something the kind of like a somebody injured, kind of like a pain, kind of like a somebody killing somebody. Yeah, this is the way that means mostly externally. Oh yeah, we don't know that ki kind of like a somebody internally people will also die too, like basically the bacterial infection, the virus infection, and things like that. We don't know about that. We don't know anything about the microorganism, nothing really at all. Uh-huh. Okay, yeah. Let me give you the context. Okay, yeah, so that you would understand. in 13th century, or maybe I don't know. Okay, so there is a very enormous amount of kind of like a something the disease that will spread. Okay, yeah. Plague. Okay, yeah. Plague is a kind of like a something such a disease that corrupt the entire Europe. Yeah, literally just like what exactly happened? Like you actually see in the kind of like a something mask which kind of like a something look like a bird. Okay, which has kind of like a something the goggles and kind of like a mouth has a kind of like a something a kind of like a something it look like bird. You actually seen that particular mask. If you don't really seen it, just Google it. The mask look like bird. Okay, yeah. And yeah, this mask is legit mask. These masks are not kind of like a, only a costume and things like that. These masks are legit mask. Okay, yeah. Why they have kind of like a, this mask? Okay, by the way, this mask is used for doctors. Okay, yeah. At that time, who is kind of like a okay, what exactly happened? What is exactly this thing? So there is a some sort of disease is actually spread entire Europe. Okay, and that disease is kind of like a something very dangerous. It's a kind of like a something people are affected by disease, and after a couple of months they will gonna die. Okay, they don't know why this thing happened. There is no external threat, nothing really at all. People just don't know what is exactly that. It just, and it's very hard to cure because they don't know the problem. Because at that time there is no technology, there is nothing really at all. Okay, there is no medicine at all because at that time medicine is not even actually kind of like evolved or invented. So it is kind of like a something the very difficult that yeah. So there is only one solution that they have is that key try not to spread that viruses. So basically what does people do on that period of time? Usually people just kind of like a somebody close the gate or kind of like a don't let get anyone inside or don't let get outside or kind of like an entire village is actually closed down. Just yeah. So this is the way that kind of like a something we stop that kind of like a plague, but we didn't really stop it. Okay, yeah. Let me tell you one thing in this plague. Okay, yeah. Almost like a probably I don't know, maybe 100 millions people die. 100 million, like a almost like a people are actually saying almost like a 50 to 60% of the population is wipe out because of this disease. 50 to 60% of the entire population of the planet is actually wipe out because of these viruses. And it's not only spread in Europe, it's actually spread in kind of like it started from the Europe, then it spread to Middle East, and then it spread to kind of like something like the Southern Asia. And probably I'm not really sure about where it spread, but the hotspot is Europe. It's a very intense hotspot is Europe, and Europe has a so many people actually live on that particular period of time. Okay, yeah. And people just like die. They don't know what is actually that stuff and stuff like that. At that time, there was a doctor. Yeah, there was a doctor, but still, they kind of like a something meant to be treated for external threats, like basically if the person actually kind of like injured or things like that. So they only have one solution to stop the bleeding. So whatever they do, they kind of like do the bandage or do the things or do the tat to kind of like somebody try to make sure that the bleeding should supposed to be stopped, because this is the only way that they think that they would kind of like simply save that particular person by stopping the bleeding. And yeah, it works, definitely it works. Okay, yeah. But when there is a kind of like some internal threats or kind of like some virus or things like that, it really required kind of like something a medicine, kind of like something the yeah, or like a robust kind of like a something the technological advancement, and they don't really have that. They don't really know nothing really about that. Okay, yeah. And at that time they just don't know what is exactly that, because like this microorganism concept is not even evolved at that time. So people just confuse and just don't know what exactly is this thing. Okay, yeah. Then basically what exactly happened, I'm not really sure. Like basically the microorganism kind of like a thing is that I'm not really sure about that. But a couple of people are started kind of like simply understanding that why this actually happened. By the way, this plague is actually happened for almost like a I don't know, maybe 200, 300 years, almost like a 500 year, probably. 500 year was too much. I'm not really sure how much year was that. Okay, yeah, probably 100, 200 year, but it is more than 100 year. That is for sure. How more than 100 year, this plague was actually kind of like a established and things like that, and people die and things like that. How does that plague is actually gone? Well, plague doesn't really gone. Okay, it's not. It's kind of like actually people die with it. Okay, yeah. So people die with it, then almost like as I mentioned, no, almost like maybe 50 to 60% population actually wipe out. So when the population actually wipe out, it wipe out with that threat, with that plague virus. Okay, yeah. So like after some sort of amount of time, people just like basically just like that gone. Okay, somewhat something like basically I'm talking about the 100 year. I'm not really sure, but more than 100 year. Okay, yeah. And more than 100 year means like, can you imagine like basically the people actually suffering from such a virus for more than 100 year? That is like really fucked up shit, dude. Like a really fucked up shit. Okay, yeah. So when this thing is actually happened, it's just like really not good, really not good. So people are actually curious about why this thing happened, why that thing. Okay, I haven't really told about the mask. Okay, yeah. So the mask is kind of like a mask for doctors. Okay, yeah. So first of all, that's one of the weirdest thing regarding about this mask is that they have kind of like a very big bird, like kind of like a, what is actually that? Okay, yeah. Why does they have that? Okay, yeah. Is it kind of like a design choices? No, it's not design choices. Then what exactly is this thing? What is actually that? Okay, yeah. At that time, okay, just concept. Okay, yeah, like basically at that time people what exactly they are thinking regarding about mask and things like that. Okay, just let me clarify what is actually this mask, like how this actually mask is actually happened. So at that time, as I mentioned, at that time there is a kind of like a virus, that plague virus is actually happening. Okay, yeah. The doctor don't want to be get infected by this virus, so they have to be protected by themselves because they are the doctor and they will gonna treat those kind of like a something the plague patient. So it is really essential that they have to be get close with that patient. Okay, now the problem is that that patient is kind of like infected by this virus, and probably there is only one thing that they know is that ki, when you touch that particular person or when you get close with that particular patient, you will get infected by you. So it is really essential that you have to be protect yourself from every inch of your body. So that means those people are actually wearing gloves and kind of like a simply black jacket and kind of like a simply that make sure that there is no kind of like a simply any kind of like a simply area of skin should supposed to be exposed with that kind of like a simply in front of the patient and things like that. So they just kind of like a create this kind of like a outfit which is kind of like a covered everything, like shoes, like basically even hand are they actually wearing hand gloves. Okay, yeah, it's like the entire body is actually covered by that. Okay, now entire the body is actually covered, but what about face? Because our eyes is really essential because we can't able to see if we close that, and we need a kind of like a mouth to kind of like a talk, and also we need a nose to breathe and things like that. So how are we supposed to do that thing? So basically at that time, okay, they kind of like a make a mask that kind of like a somebody covered that thing. Okay, yeah, but it's kind of like a very claustrophobic at that time. Okay, claustrophobic means what? Ki, like basically a doctor has to be wear that mask for almost like an entire day and night. Okay, yeah. And it's not really feasible at that time. Okay, yeah. And at that time people actually think that ki they are kind of like a very difficult to breathe because people think that ki the mask that they have is kind of like a something very close. Like basically what I'm trying to tell you is this thing. I'm not talking about the mask that is kind of like a bird like mask. No, I'm talking about kind of like a mask which is kind of like a something the right now that we have mask like basically completely packed like basically there is no kind of like a space between your mouth and kind of like a nose and things like that, and kind of like a assembly your eyes, it just yeah. So at that time people think that ki, what if we could kind of like a simply make a mask which has kind of like a significant amount of space in front of our eyes and no in front of our mouth and nose. Okay, yeah. So that there is some sort of air would be there, and kind of like a somebody, the doctor would kind of like a breathe that air. Okay, probably they have kind of like a thought that ki, what if we could kind of like a make that particular space for that breathe and things like that. So they make this kind of like a somebody mask. Okay, they make this kind of like a somebody mask that kind of like a somebody have significant amount of space, so that kind of like a doctor would kind of like a breathe little bit kind of like a somebody air, and it doesn't feel really that much kind of like a somebody claustrophobic or things like that. But still this mask is like very claustrophobic. It's like that. It's you are covering this suit. It's like really fucked up shit, dude. It's really fucked up shit. Okay, yeah. But at that time there is no choices at all. Okay, yeah. Like right now we have kind of like a biohazard suit. It can kind of like a somebody the like try to kind of like a somebody stop the infected virus inside our things. So we have kind of like a biohazard suits which is kind of like a somebody try to prevent us. But at that time they don't really have that, na. And as also today's biohazard suit is kind of like a way much lighter and things like that. But at that time they are kind of like a using leather and kind of like a some very thick cloth and things like that. They try to make sure that there is no kind of like a simply the disease should supposed to be transferred from patient to doctor. So that's why they are kind of like a try to protect themselves to make this kind of like a somebody mask, which is something that like a really unique in itself, like as a kind of like a somebody just like a design choices which is very weird, but it's kind of like a creates its own kind of like a somebody image in itself. Okay, yeah. And you actually kind of like a somebody that image is kind of like a connect with this plague. Okay, yeah. It is like a really crazy. Okay, yeah. So this is actually happened for almost like 100 years. I'm not really sure, maybe just like 100 200 years. I'm not really sure about that. Okay, yeah. But then after that, okay, people are trying to think about why does this actually happen, why does these people actually die and things like that. So people are started doing study and things like that. Okay, I'm actually talking about maybe like maybe almost like 800 to 700 century. I'm not really sure about that, but probably is this thing the people in Europe are trying to think about why this actually happened, why the people actually die and things like that. And basically at that time people actually discovered that there is also another kind of like a something, the organism who are so tiny are actually living around with us and we don't know, and they are exist in trillions in number. And when they found out, they just crazy about that. Like let me tell you one thing. Okay, yeah. What is exactly a species from your point of perspective? Okay, what is exactly that you called as a kind of like a species? A species that you could see, right? A kind of like a zebra that you could see, a lion that you could see, a bird, a kind of like an insect that you could see, right? So basically I called them a kind of like a so many species that I could see, things like that. But this is the first time as a human found out that there is a kind of like a somebody entire kind of like a something, the ecosystem of the small kind of like a small size of animal which is so small that we can't even see in our naked eyes, are actually available in trillions in number. The people found it very very crazy. They just don't know what is exactly that. Okay, yeah. And when the people found out that there is a kind of like at that time they don't know the bacteria and virus and things like that. They just know the microorganism. There is a kind of like a things is actually available, a microorganism, and they just don't know what exactly is this thing and that. And since the discovery happened, people are started to figure it out what is exactly this and what is exactly that. People are trying to figure it out that ki, okay, this is the bacteria, this is the protein, this is the viruses, this is this that. Like since the technology improved, we kind of like try to figure it out what is exactly this and what is exactly that. Okay, yeah. We also try to improve that how this kind of like a simply make sure that disease would not gonna happen. Okay, yeah. There is a kind of like a something amazing discoveries actually happened. What is exactly that? Penicillin, probably penicillin. Is it penicillin? I don't know. There is like a I just know the story. There is a guy who kind of like a something just like basically in the Europe. Okay, let me tell you story. I'm not really sure about who is this guy, but let me tell you a story. I'm not really sure about that, but I heard that story. Okay, so in the Europe, people are actually infected by some sort of disease. Okay, I'm talking about kind of like a small disease and things like that. Okay, and people just don't know what is exactly that. Okay, people are not dying, but people are kind of like a somebody like a not feel good. They are kind of like a illness all the time and things like that. So just like basically in that particular region, everyone is kind of like infected by this kind of like a particular disease. Okay, now the one specific area in that particular region is not infected by that, and that is kind of like something very weird. Okay, because let me tell you one thing. Let's just say that ki a hotspot, like let's just say like hundreds of people, okay, are kind of like a compact in one close group. Okay, now in the hundreds of people, almost like a 95% of people are infected by some sort of disease, and only 5% are not infected by that disease. This is kind of like a usual thing, but it makes it more usual. It makes it more kind of like a some surprise that those 5% of the people are in that part of those groups. Like basically those 5 people are actually in that group, in the hundreds people of the group. All the 95 people, all the neighboring people are kind of like somebody infected by this disease, but they are not. So the doctor and kind of like they all thinking that why does those people are not get infected? What exactly is this thing? What is exactly that? Okay, so basically I'm not really sure who's that guy, but that particular person is kind of like a somebody try to think about what is actually this. Like he was kind of like a curious that why this particular like a particular 5% of people is not actually affected by that. Okay, now he kind of like a somebody just like that na he realized that those 5% of the people are not get infected is because of kind of like only one thing. And what is that one thing? That one place, okay, that 5% of the people are kind of like doing something very extraordinary in their life. Okay, like almost like a 95% of the people are doing farming or doing kind of like a usual stuff and stuff like that. But that 5% of the people are kind of like doing something very different. What are they doing something different? They are kind of like somebody taking the milk out from the cow. Okay, like basically they have kind of like somebody doing has a business about the milk. Okay, and you know na how to suppose, like basically is this thing, like basically you have to take out the kind of like a milk from the cow. Just you have to do this process. I'm not really sure what exactly that, but they kind of like a touch the kind of like a nipples of the cows and kind of like a pull out, and kind of like some milk is actually out. Okay, so this is the way that kind of like a some milk is, like people actually doing that thing, okay, every day. And this is kind of like something very unique about, like as a doctor find out that key this is very unique. Okay, because of those people are kind of like a take out the milk from the cow, they are not get infected by this disease. So it is like a really crazy. By the way, let me tell you one thing. The milk is actually consumed by not only those 5% of people, they actually consumed by the hundreds of people too. But 95% of people actually infected. But like basically it's this thing na ki that kind of like a doctor discovered that the people who actually touch that particular cow nipple for kind of like a take out that milk, those people are not affected. Only those people are not really affected. So this person is kind of like a try to digging the research and things and that and add that I'm not really sure. The maybe kind of like a disease would be penicillin or anesthesia. No, not anesthesia. Kind of polio. No, it's not polio. It's something else. It's a something. What is actually this thing? Penicillin? Probably penicillin. I like basically I'm pretty much kind of like something this thing. Probably let me Google it. What is actually that? What do I supposed to Google? Should I say penicillin? Penicillin medical invention. Medical invention. By the way, it's kind of like a give the very. It's not penicillin. It's a. I'm not really sure. Like I don't know regarding about that. Which kind of like a stuff should I supposed to search right now? But it's actually happened. Like basically, if you knew this thing, maybe kind of like a correct me or not, but probably this was like basically I heard that somewhere. I'm just completely forget that who is that particular person guy and things like that. Okay, so he okay, so that particular person is kind of like a simply make a vaccination. Yeah, vaccination. Okay, the first vaccination. Like let me search about the first vaccination. um FIRST first VACC first vaccination. Okay, 1968 smallpox vaccine is kind of Edward Jenner in 1769. Yeah, that is okay. Yeah, that's a smallpox vaccine. Oh yeah, smallpox vaccine. So I just kind of like somebody. Okay, so first vaccination was kind of like somebody for the smallpox vaccine developed by the English physician Edward Jenner in the 1796 using the cowpox. Cowpox is a confer immunity against the deadly disease. Before the Jenner scientists approached that the documentation is actually principle involved the exist in Asia, but Jenner used to relate with the safer virus vaccine and its documented effectiveness led to the foundation of the modern vaccination. Observation: the Jenner noticed that that the milkmaid who had the contacted the cowpox were immune to the smallpox. Yeah, like 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 I told you, na, like basically this thing, the people who kind of like somebody take out the milk from the cow, those people are kind of like somebody this thing are not infected by this particular disease, and that disease was named is a smallpox, and the person who kind of like somebody kind of like this thing, that doctor name is Edward Jenner. Okay, okay, let me tell you one thing, that Jenner. Okay, so basically he just realized this thing. Okay, now then he kind of like found the cure. Okay, I don't know, he do a lot of kind of like a scientific stuff and stuff like that. I'm not going to talk about that. Okay, he kind of like make a cure. Okay, the cure for who? Okay, like basically let me tell you one thing. Okay, it's a very kind of like a very different thing, but let me give you the context. Okay, he understand. Okay, by the way, our body is actually kind of like somebody do the same thing. Okay, I'm just try to first of all simplify as better as possible. Okay, let's just say you are a normal person, you never really done any kind of like a fight or things like that. Okay, now there is in front of you, there is a kind of like a boxing champion. Okay, and you like basically you haven't really done any kind of like a boxing or things like that, and there is a kind of like a boxing champion, and you have to fight with that champion. Okay, what chances do I have that I should supposed to be win? How many, like tell me in percentage. 1%, 2%? Yeah, probably less than that. Why? Because this is the boxing champion. I'm actually like basically I can hit with my eye, I can hit with my hand, but probably I don't really have that much kind of like a skills to fight with the boxer, right? Nothing really at all. Na? How do I supposed to defeat that particular person that I don't really know how to do boxing or things like that? It's a kind of like a things that now you are try to competing with such a thing that is kind of like that particular person actually far ahead in front of you. Okay, regarding about these things, like basically you are kind of like have a match with a chess with a grandmaster, and you don't really play any kind of like a chess in your entire period of lifetime. How much chances that you have that you're gonna win? Obviously less than 0%, dude, right? So this is what it is. Okay, now what I do is that okay, you fail this match, you kind of like lose this match, now you came out. Okay, now I train you to kind of like do the boxing and things. I teach you everything regarding about the every strategy and things and that and that and that. Okay, after a year there is also rematch happen with you, that same champion, and right now you are upgraded version of previous version, like you know little bit of boxing and things like that. Okay, now how much chances that you will gonna win this battle? Probably not 1 or 2%, right? Maybe 50%, probably 50% chances that you might kind of like a fight with this particular stuff, right? What I'm trying to tell you is this thing, that our human mind, or not only human mind, our human body is kind of like somebody, not like it's not kind of like a comes with a learn everything. No, it has to be kind of like a learn, then it fight. Okay, yeah, then it fight. So this is what it is. Like basically is this thing na ki we are kind of like simply not told, no, not we are kind of like simply treating ourselves to learn boxing, and when we learn boxing we can fight with a boxing person like a boxer player and things like that, right? So basically is this thing we have to be new this kind of like a simply the kind of like a simply the boxing learning thing, right? Okay, yeah. This is exactly the same thing happened with our antibodies and virus and things like that. Okay, let me tell you one thing. Our antibodies at that time, there is no RBC, there is no WBC. I'm talking about 1876, 1796. Oh boy, it's a very far away. 1796. Okay, yeah. In the 1796, there is like right now we knew that there is RBC, red blood capsules, white blood capsules, stem cells, and those are kind of like a stuff and stuff like that. We knew that thing. Okay, white blood capsules are kind of like a fight, the kind of like assembly foreign particle and things like that. We knew that thing. Okay, yeah, because the advancement and stuff like that. But in 1796, they don't know about that. They don't know anything about that. They just only knew that there is some sort of kind of like a microorganism is actually inside of us. Okay, yeah. And basically this thing they are kind of like simply fighting. So basically that Edward Jenner kind of like a thing that ki, what if we kind of like simply give them a training about fighting the boxing champion. Okay, yeah. Like basically what exactly happened. Okay, let's just say that in 17 centuries, okay, yeah, 16 17 centuries, people actually getting the smallpox because of their antibody. They are kind of like assembly whatever their immune system is not equipped with the kind of like assembly antibodies to fight with those smallpoxes virus. So that's why they fail. Okay, yeah. So what if Edward Jenner thinks that ki, what if I kind of like assembly give them smallpox disease like intentionally, like basically by kind of like an injection and things like that. I just inject that viruses inside of them. Okay, yeah. When that particular thing happened, that kind of like assembly their antibodies like basically they kind of like a fight with that particular that kind of like viruses and things like that. Okay, yeah. In that particular some people will gonna die over their period over the time, but some people might not die. Okay, yeah. And when the people who not die, they will not gonna affect by a smallpox again. Okay, what I'm trying to tell you. Okay, what exactly is this thing? So basically, previously people will actually die is because of the smallpox. Okay, and this is the first time they are actually getting the smallpox and they actually die. Okay, so this is very crazy thing happened. Okay, they didn't really found any kind of like a person who had a smallpox in the previous. Okay, yeah, they don't know that, or they like basically nothing really at all. This cow region, this kind of like a village is actually kind of like not infected by the smallpox and things like that. So he realized that what if I like basically at early stage of the life I give the smallpox to the people will kind of inside the people will gonna like inside the people's body, the antibodies and microorganism fight with that particular virus and became the antibodies. Okay, now antibodies means like that, like basically as I mentioned that I kind of like give them training to learn the boxing and things like that. This is what exactly is it. I'm kind of like giving the kind of like something the like viruses so that people actually fight with that thing at early stage. Okay, yeah. And when they fight and then when they learn that thing, then probably they are really equipped with this kind of like a fight with this smallpox virus. And when they are kind of like a get outside, that smallpox virus will not gonna get inside their bodies because they're already equipped with the knowledge of how to defeat that smallpox virus. Same thing happened with the boxing message. Like if I kind of like a give them learn before went inside the boxing arena, I kind of like give them training and things that particular person will gonna fight with that boxing champion. And this is what exactly kind of like a Edward Jenner do. Okay, and he kind of like a give this kind of like a early stage like he kind of like a give kind of like a cure and kind of like give them to the patient, or not only the patient but as also kind of like somebody, every person who doesn't really get affected by the smallpox. Okay, yeah, because in somewhere part of the life they will gonna affected by this kind of like somebody, this smallpox, so they need this particular cure, and this is called as a first vaccination. Okay, and by the way, people are actually, the vaccination that you are thinking right now, it's considered as a really good thing, right? But at that time, vaccination is a kind of like a called as a terrorist, called as a kind of like a somebody threat. Like people are don't really want to do any vaccination. Legitly, almost like 100 out of maybe 2 to 3% are kind of like a somebody ready for the vaccination, because at that time now, like right now, before the vaccination, like basically when the, like in today's world, the when the vaccination actually released, it kind of like went through multiple stages, millions of trillions of genetic sequence went through their thing, like a what kind of like a disadvantage gonna happen and stuff like that. Yeah, millions of times they will gonna test that thing, and after the test they will kind of like pass that vaccination, and that vaccination is actually circulated through entire population. Okay, yeah, because once this kind of like a vaccination actually injected to the kind of like a people, then there is no undo, there is nothing really at all. So basically if there is a kind of like a some vaccination fault in it, the all the kind of like a people will gonna die or things like that, they will gonna affected by some sort of disease or things like that. So it is really make sure that we actually make sure that today's world that we have to testify in every possible way. So we actually test in multiple ways that, and then after that we kind of like somebody establish the vaccination, right? But in 1796 there is no kind of like a drive, there is no kind of like a testing, there is no kind of like a somebody, and kind of like a somebody teaching the kind of like a somebody that there is no way to kind of like a refine the vaccination process, nothing really at all. They just only have one cure, it work on some people, it might not work on some people, means like that, like if I give the vaccination to the 10 people, probably 10 out of 2 people might gonna die and 8 people will gonna survive. So basically what exactly is this thing na ki people are actually so kind of like basically at that time people don't really know that he was kind of like a safe because of this thing. It's a kind of like only a solution before the conflict happened. Okay, yeah, so 2 people actually die because of this thing. So people are actually kind of like somebody don't really understand the gravity of it, and they are kind of like always just they are really scared about this vaccination. They think that no, it's really really wrong thing. Even in that particular period of time, the Edward Jenner, the particular person who kind of like invented this vaccination, he's kind of like a threaten, he's kind of like somebody, he just like his life is really tough regarding about this making, and people are not really considered that stuff and stuff like that. But because of this thing we just kind of like simply live right now. I also had a smallpox too, by the way. Okay, yeah, like basically almost like years ago I also had a smallpox. Okay, yeah, I also had a smallpox from my cousin. Okay, like basically I went to my cousin has infected by the smallpox, and I kind of like hang out with him, and kind of like I also had a smallpox too, and it was really crazy smallpox. It's just like that now I was kind of like a sitting in that room, and just like basically is this thing, my mother is kind of like a somebody try to kind of like a stay away, but still is this thing I also had a smallpox. Then after me, my sister has a smallpox too, and then my father probably, no, I don't really think that my father had a smallpox, no, like they already are equipped with that thing. Okay, yeah, but yeah, this is kind of like that's when that smallpox happened, it just really fucked up shit. Okay, I still knew that I am actually at, maybe I'm probably, maybe how much was my age was, I think that I'm not really sure my age, but at that time my I am I'm actually at the maybe fourth standard. Yeah, fourth standard. Fourth standard means my age would be maybe 7 to 8, probably 8, 7 to 8. Yeah, 7 or 8 year. At that time, I actually infected by the smallpox. Okay, yeah. So this is what actually happened. By the way, the question is actually kind of like something very different. The question is actually kind of like saying this thing that what if virus actually evolved rather than harm? Well, we knew a lot of viruses that could kind of like give us harm. COVID viruses, AIDS, hepatitis, and a lot of kind of like a virus that we think that it will kind of like harm us. But rather than, there is also another viruses which kind of like help us to kind of like build our immune system is actually much more better. I'm not really sure. I don't know about those names and things like that. But there are so many kind of like only microorganism viruses. They are kind of like try to prevent from every possible threats and things like that. Okay, yeah. And now, what if scenario that what if kind of like assembly all the viruses will kind of like assembly try to help, not harm? Then what would be that reality? Probably it would be really worse. Okay, yeah. Because let me tell you one thing now. Failure is a very essential part of success. Okay, yeah, and it it actually kind of like assembly impact not only in human point of perspective, but in everything. Like basically, is this thing when there is no harm, then there is no kind of like a something, no kind of like a like basically what is exactly is this thing now? Okay, if you think that key boxing match is a kind of like a something really not good sport because it kind of like a fight and things like that, so we shouldn't supposed to be play, right? But this is wrong na, because when the real conflict happened, then we don't really have that much kind of like a assembly information to how to feed, how to defeat, or how to things like that. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing that key when the virus is actually giving us harmful and things like that, it's somewhat something good because it creates the problem, and we are the humans, we should supposed to be solve that problem, we fix the solution, we create the solution, and we make sure that this not gonna happen again. But it is really essential to kind of like have a problem. If we not have a problem, then how do we have a solution? And if we not have a solution, then we might not grow, right? So it's really essential to kind of like have a harmful viruses too. Yeah, like basically I'm not gonna suggest that like a basically a harmful viruses that can kind of like kill everybody and things and that. No, I don't want that too. But it's kind of like a thing that it's really essential to have those harmful viruses too, because it kind of like a gives us kind of like some sort of purposes, some sort of kind of, I don't know how I supposed to explain this thing, dude. I think that it's a life. It's a kind of like a things that it's a kind of like a rule book that everyone follow, not only the human but other species too. And yeah, this is what it is. Okay, so probably if I could imagine what if a kind of like a scenario that viruses would not gonna harm, I think we might gonna die as early as possible as we can, because it just we don't know that. We just like what if imagine, okay, yeah, imagine a situation, okay, yeah, there is some sort of life is actually kind of like a we found in another planet, let's just say Mars. Okay, imagine, no? Okay, yeah, imagine a life that we form. Imagine we could kind of like assembly that key found a kind of like assembly life on Mars. Okay, yeah. Now that life is kind of like a, let's just say, look like a microorganism, a very tiny microorganism, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. But this microorganism is not actually build the same body complex that we build. Like basically our body complexes, like basically the way that we build our body is actually built by the carbon. Okay, yeah, carbon is our essential form of element, so that our building blocks is the carbon. Okay, yeah, and actually we also consume carbohydrates to kind of like fill up those carbons and things like that. But and basically this carbon is very essential because the carbon is kind of like abundant in our atmosphere, right? But other planets, let's just say Mars, they don't really have a carbon. Maybe they are kind of like a simply building block would be silicon. Okay, yeah, silicon is also kind of like a doing the same complex structure as a carbon. Okay, yeah. So their building blocks are kind of like a silicon, so they might have something very different body structure or building blocks that we don't know that. Okay, yeah. Carbon or silicon is a kind of like a simply one single step to kind of like know that stuff, but the way that it creates the complex mechanism, complex calculation regarding about the other elements and things like that, we don't know that. And when we not knew that particular stuff, then probably is this thing that na ki, let's just imagine that ki, let's just say that one person accidentally infected by this microorganism accidentally. Okay, yeah. He don't know that. Okay, yeah. And our scientific equipment are not actually showing any kind of like symptoms that he was kind of like infected, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. And let's just say that because of we have kind of like a viruses that kind of like simply not harmful, they are kind of like simply always kind of like a help us and things and that, then probably we don't really notice that. Even our scientific equipment are not only notice that that particular person came to the kind of like a planet earth and kind of like somebody talked with the other peoples and things, and that virus is actually spread to the entire human history, human people, but they don't know that. And suddenly something happened, okay, yeah, because like let's just say when that virus is actually kind of like a spread to the entire humanity, that virus is not active, it just kind of like considered as a foreign particle. But what if something that virus is actually active because of some certain thing, and suddenly let's just say suddenly is a kind of like a somebody is this thing that ki entire human evolution is actually kind of like endangered because of this thing, because of that key, that particular virus actually became active because some sort of thing and just people die. Imagine scenario like a kind of like somebody is this thing. Let's just imagine we have kind of like a something a trash, let's just say a kind of like a somebody kind of like a somebody is this thing that ki wood, okay, yeah, we kind of like collect the almost like a so much amount of wood, okay, dry wood, and we put the kerosene all around, okay, yeah, but we don't really start the fire, we just put the kerosene all around the wood and things like that, okay, yeah. Now that kerosene will gonna stick with there for maybe 1 day or 2 day, I don't know, dude, kerosene will gonna evaporate. Okay, let's just say that kerosene is kind of like available for almost like couple of hours, okay, but we don't really start the fire. But what if we put the one single kind of like a throw the fire in it, it just blows the entire kind of like a something the wood. Because of that ki when we kind of like a spread the kerosene over that particular wood, it's, yeah, it's spread, it is harmful, but it's not active because there is no fire. And when we kind of like give them just one single fire in there, then entire wood started burning, and it was kind of like somebody just, and this would be something happen exactly like that, okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, the viruses that we have is kind of like a somebody, somewhat virus is actually kind of like helping us, somewhat something virus is kind of like a somebody harmful, and that is good, that is great, that is right, that is best. Like basically is this thing na ki progress is actually happened when we have find when we make mistakes, when we found the mistake, when we face this resistance, when it's just like that na, it's just like that. Just imagine you are kind of like somebody's running a race in just like like basically okay, imagine, okay, just imagine, okay, you have a slide, okay, yeah, like let's just say there is a kind of like a slide, almost like a 10 slide, okay, yeah, which is actually kind of like a simply 10 meter from the ground surface, okay. Now 10 slide and 10 people is actually kind of like a slide that slide like slide that slide, I'm not really sure, okay, yeah. Now the race is that who will gonna reach to the bottom first, okay. So this is the race, and everyone kind of like really excited, and everyone kind of try to do that. Now couple of people are kind of like somebody arrive, or couple of people, but mostly almost like most of people will gonna arrive at same time, because everyone is kind of like a somebody like started their slide at the same time, they will gonna ended their slide at maybe somewhat something millisecond, maybe fraction difference, but they will gonna arrive at the same time, okay, yeah. At first time you found it really fun and really good and really great, but if you do this thing once, twice, thrice, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time, seventh time, eighth time, ninth time, probably at the 10th time you might not enjoy that particular stuff, you enjoy that particular slide thing, but then after that you might not enjoy, because there is no resistance at all, no, dude, nothing really at all. It just, or just like maybe slide is a kind of like a very weird example. Let's just imagine that ki we have a race, but in that particular race we don't have to run, we just walk, just a normal walk, okay, yeah. So we just have to walk from one place to another place. The people who are kind of like somebody arrive first will gonna winner. Is it kind of like a boring, like would, I don't know, like basically the athlete would be kind of like a somebody became so bored, because they might have started running a little bit, but the authority kind of like say that no, you are not running. Okay, if you are run, you were gonna disqualify. So basically, is this thing people will just walk, and basically even if you win the prize, I don't really think that I kind of like somebody just deserve for that. It just not feel right. So resistance, failure, problem is really essential for our growth. So if we have a kind of like a viruses that can helpful rather than harm, then it will gonna stop the progress, and that is not good thing, dude. That is not good thing. Okay, so I think that it is really essential to have those things. A little bit something right, little bit something wrong. We are living in such a world where world is not exactly white or world is not exactly black either. We are in kind of like a little bit gray. We are trying to make little bit of white shade into it. We put little bit of dark shade into it. It's a kind of like somebody making the balance between them, and that's a good thing. I think that is the real color. Sometimes I just kind of like a talk like a kind of like a professor in it. I don't know why, but it's just like whenever I kind of like talk about some stuff, I just feel good. I feel something like that, right? I don't know how to say. All right, this is it. I should supposed to be in here, and thank you.